This is a training I'm very excited about. I've done a similar training about 5 years ago at an event that I ran called Elevate. It was a smaller event because it took place in 2020, and we all know what was going on in 2020. And I've since then kind of revamped it because now that I have exited my school and sold my school, a couple of things shifted in terms of, man, if I just kind of had this roadmap, if I were to start all over again, this is kind of the order of which I would have focused on as I was growing my school. So appreciate everybody hopping in. Um, do you guys think it would be helpful to kind of have a roadmap depending on, like, hey, if you're at $10,000 a month, this is how to get to the next level, or if you're at $30,000 a month, this is how you would want to get to the next level? I think so, right? So that's really what we're going to be unpacking, is these 4 phases of a martial arts school. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. You guys give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen. Is that good? Awesome. Very cool. And I will do my best. We still have a bunch of people in the waiting room coming in. Very cool. All right, should be good to go. It's been a while since I've used a keynote. Usually use Canva. It's kind of my favorite area to create keynotes in. So my mission today is really to break down the 4 phases of a martial arts school to help you really build a strong foundation. And I want you to kind of marinate on this question for a second. Like, if you could go back and you could completely start over, would there be certain things that you would have implemented sooner than later in your school? And for me, the answer was like, well, yeah, I would have done this sooner. I would have done this sooner. I maybe would have waited to do this a little bit later. For me, one of those was launching an after school and summer camp. I really wished that I would have maximized the profitability in my evening martial arts program before I kind of shifted focus. So as we kind of think back and look back on that journey, there are probably, puzzle pieces that we would move around a little bit. So we are going to first start with talking about your EHR. And if you're not sure what your EHR is, this is a number that might wake you up, and we consider it your effective hourly rate. And oftentimes, as you start growing and scaling your school, you're not conscious of your effective hourly rate, and you're doing things that you could easily pay somebody else to do, that would allow you to focus on the bigger picture, more strategy, more training your team types of tasks. And then we're going to break down each one of these phases. So we've got the startup phase, we've got the stability phase, we've got the scale phase, and we've got the significance phase. And I was really inspired by a book called Founder, Farmer, Tinker, Thief. Founder, Farmer, Tinker, Thief. And that really inspired me to kind of put together this presentation for martial arts school owners. So we're going to break down each one of those phases, and we're going to break them down by revenue. So as always, let's be present. Please feel free to ask questions, get into the chat room, take notes as well. And as we go through, I'll stop and pause, see if you guys have questions. You can unmute, or you can just put them in the chat. So with that being said, the 4 phases that we are going through, at the bottom, we've got that startup phase, and that's 0 to 15,000. The next phase is 15 to 30. The next phase is 30 to 50. And then the top phase is 50 and up. So depending on where you're at in your journey, you're going to be falling into one of these 4 phases. And what I'm also going to provide you guys is with a checklist, so that you can look through these items that I recommend to make sure that you have fully, synced in at each one of the phases. And I'll share that with you at the end. We might have some program directors on here, or instructors, but I think you opened a school and a business to get a higher return on your time, not to buy yourself a job. And for most, and it's not just school owners, it's for most entrepreneurs, they really don't own a business. They have a glorified job. And we ultimately, as we move through these phases, don't want to be adding more to your plate. We want to be removing those items. And I don't know about you, but I think having a business that can pay you even when you're not there, there's one thing to run a martial arts school and have to be there and have to be on the mat and have to teach the classes and have to do the intros and have to do the lead follow up versus you have other people in place that do that on a day-to-day basis. And if you want to do those things, you can. And it's typically, if you feel like you are wearing all of those hats, it's just because you just don't have a strong foundation. And that's why we have these phases. So as we go through them, what I want to remind you of is, you might be in the 30 to 50,000 phase, but that doesn't necessarily equal foundational strength. Like you could absolutely be in the 30 to 50,000 phase without having all of the boxes checked in the base phase, that ground phase of startup. But I just want that to kind of, be highlighted that like, well, okay, how come you don't? Because these are some kind of foundational systems that you should have in your school. And then you can go back and you can complete any of the unchecked boxes in the earlier phases. Okay. So these are actual pictures of kind of my journey. This was when I was first getting started. So this was my startup phase. This was the stability phase when we moved into our next facility. Then we had our scale phase. A lot of lessons here. Moved into a 12,000 square foot facility, which was a lot of square feet and a lot of trash cans that had to go out. And then finally, the significance phase. So everything that I'm speaking to you about is not from theory. It's from, my personal experience. I did grow a school much higher to 50 than the top significance, which is the 50,000, and then eventually had a successful exit. So there's often two things that hold school owners back. And the first one is a do-it-yourself mindset, and the other is not understanding their effective hourly rate. So I want to first talk about this do-it-yourself mindset. Productivity is a skill that you can actually develop, and it's one that I believe you have to develop. In any business, you have to decide if you want to spend time doing it yourself or you ultimately want to hire it out. But for those of you that are just getting started and you're in that startup phase, you typically don't have a lot of money, and also your time isn't worth much, like no offense. But you do eventually need to break yourself from the do-it-yourself mindset. When I think back when I was first starting my school, I spent more time choosing paint colors and furniture and all of these things that were not revenue-generating opportunities. And oftentimes, a struggling entrepreneur is someone who doesn't know what to do, so they just do it all, or they avoid the hard work by doing everything else instead. And that's kind of like, when you're first getting started in the school and spending time at Home Depot and buying all these things and spending all this time on picking the paint chip colors, like that's you trying to avoid the hard work. One of my favorite books, on this kind of subject and topic is by Steven Pressfield. It's called The War of Art. And he talks about this concept of resistance and how resistance comes in many forms. It comes in procrastination, it comes in distraction, it comes in multitasking. And you're ultimately going to run into this at some point, right? Like it is tempting to clean the mats instead of picking up the phone to follow up leads. It's tempting to go buy supplies instead of putting out rack cards. It's tempting to stay on the mat a little longer after class to chat with the guys after, maybe an open mat BJJ session instead of going back and answering emails. And, oftentimes we tell ourselves that, oh, well, I'm just saving money doing it myself and I'm embracing the hustle. But it is a trap. It is a trap that you can find yourself in because work will always expand to fill the time and space that you give it. And we call that Parkinson's law. So it's the adage that work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. This is why, so I don't know if you were one of those people, but It's sometimes why procrastinators, that, they'll wait they might have 2 weeks to write an essay or to do a project, and they wait until 2 hours before, and they can get it done within those 2 hours. So we want to make sure that we are conscious of not staying in that do-it-yourself mindset. And we've all had this thought that, like, hey, nobody can do it better than me. But what you have to remember as an entrepreneur is that your key asset is time. And in the first weeks and months of getting your business off the ground, like, you shouldn't be spending all of your time just painting the walls. You should be doing the hard stuff, which is getting new students. And you saw this a lot during COVID when, like, all of our schools were shut down. There were a lot of schools that spent a lot of time on, like, getting new equipment or refurnishing their academies and not focusing on the things that would actually get them new students or make them money. So we open our businesses to earn a higher return on our time, not just to buy ourselves a job. And many of us own a job and not a business. And it's largely because we spend so much time on do-it-yourself projects. Eventually, you have to hire someone out and then find work that will cover the cost. So let's start with your EHR, which stands for your effective hourly rate. All of us have one. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to take our total yearly income. And so you need to know how much you're making in a year and then your total hours work. So on average, there's about 2,000 hours worked for many entrepreneurs. It's a lot more than that, especially martial arts schools. Many aren't just open 4 or 5 days a week. You might be open 6 days. You might even be open 7 days. But just to kind of give you like a roundabout example, if you were making $100,000 a year and you divide that by that 2,000 hours, that means your effective hourly rate is $50 an hour. Okay. And just very simple, basic math with a calculator. And these are going to give you real numbers. And if this is where you're at and you have an effective hourly rate of $50 and you're sitting there cleaning the mats, which is something that you could pay somebody minimum wage or slightly higher to do, that's not the best use of your time. Okay. So once you know what your effective hourly rate is, my suggestion is to make a list of everything that you do on a weekly basis. Some of the easiest things just to start with is just basic time tracking. So you could just get a sheet of paper and every 15 minutes write down what you do. This is exercises that we make our team members go through so that we can assess where the majority of their time is going. But just make a list of everything that you're doing on a weekly basis, bi-weekly basis, and then rank them based on the cost that it would take for you to get someone else to do it. And there are going to be certain things that you're probably not going to be able to afford to hire out, but there are definitely going to be some things on there that you can. And what I like to do, especially if you're just getting started out, is if it doesn't touch the customer, it's a good filter of something that you should hire out. And cleaning is just, like a really great example for that. And eventually we want to be able to move from doing the job to owning the business. And I think there's this misconception that, you have to immediately hire full-time employees. Like, you don't. My very first hire was a part-time, person who helped out with some of the front desk admin duties. And then eventually that turned into a full-time program director position. So you can move incrementally, but in order to replace yourself in the roles that you are currently doing in your school, you've got to identify the tasks. You've got to be able to bullet point those tasks as well. Like, what are the, things that need to be done? You've got to set the gold standard. And then ultimately we have to evaluate their success. And scaling a company is literally just doing this over and over and over again. Okay. So I want you to calculate your EHR, your effective hourly rate. Nothing that I'm asking you to share. Just keep that to yourself personally. And some of you might be looking at that number. It might be a little bit scary. Might even be like tempting to go get, a part-time job somewhere else. But when you know this number, you can build on it and you can increase the value of your time. All right. So let's go ahead. Now that you know your effective hourly rate, let's go ahead and start with this startup phase, which is this 0 to 15,000. So if everybody could in the chat, You don't need to put the number that you're doing, but are you startup, stability, scale, or significant? So startup is your 0 to 15,000. Stability, you're somewhere between 15 to 30, and this is just your revenue that's coming in on a monthly basis. Scale is 30 to 50, and significance would be 50 and above. So just go ahead and drop that in the chat just like that. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Sky. Thank you, Mr. Steve. Thank you, Rebecca. Okay, so we've got some scales, we've got some stability, we've got some significance in the startup phase. Yeah, well, here's the thing about the startup phase. Everybody's got to start in the startup phase, right? So keep that in mind. You are not alone. All of these people that, are putting significance and scale and stability, they had to start there, okay? So you're ultimately going to see a recurring theme in each one of these, and that recurring theme is staff and developing your staff. And the better and faster you can develop your staff, the faster you will go up the phases from phase 1 all the way to phase 4. So let's start with the startup. This phase is all about self-sustainability. For those of you that are in the higher phases, I'm sure you think back on those times. And if this phase had hashtag, it would be grinding and hustling. And typically, you are the brand. You, the owner, are the brand. When people think of the martial arts school, they think of your face, right? And that can actually be a superpower in the beginning, but sometimes our superpowers turn into our Achilles heel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you this 10 checklist items, okay? So there's 10 items we're going to go through that, man, if I just could start all over again, these would be the 10 things I would make sure that I would have in place as I started to grow my business. And the first one might seem kind of counterintuitive to you. But what I told you earlier is from every single one of these phases, the recurring theme you're going to see is staff, right? If you want to build something big and something great, you need great people. And if you don't kind of lock this in the beginning, you could ultimately build a culture that could hurt your business. So I believe one of the first things that you need to establish when you're first starting your business are what are your core values? And there's a really great book. I'm always going to drop book recommendations, guys, to you. So definitely write them down, put them in a notepad somewhere. But this book is actually, if somebody said, hey, I'm starting out as an entrepreneur, what are the first top 5 books I should read? This book would be in one of the top 5. So this is Traction by Gino Wickman. You got Mr. Sky saying the Traction book changed our business forever. And really just understanding who you are and what your school stands for is so important because you can use this as kind of a filter and a guide to make decisions in your school. So these were actually some of our core values at Gracie Pack. Our core values did change as our school evolved. So I want to say for about the first 5 years, these were our core values. And then we had some, like staff rotation, some changes that were happening, and we decided to redo our core values. But we go above and beyond in every situation. We're a family-friendly academy. We outcool the competition. We're hardworking, tenacious, and enthusiastic. And these core values really, they weren't just words up on a wall, right? We built them into our meetings with our team, and it just allowed us to say, this is who we are and this is how we operate, okay? And I know a lot of martial arts schools don't do this in the beginning. They do this later on as they start to grow a team, and then they realize they started to hire people that weren't aligned with their culture, okay? Yes or no in the chat, core values. Do you have them? And hopefully if you have them, does everybody on your team know them, right? There's a difference between saying you have core values and actually living those core values, right? We don't just want them on the walls. We need to see it in the halls. I heard that a couple of weeks ago, and I thought that was cool. All right. Yes, sort of have, but not written. Yes, yes. Okay. So number 1, core values. Just finished the book, working on it. Very good. Yes, we review level 10. Okay. Number 2, you got to determine your key programs. And ideally, you should be selling programs, not memberships. This is a concept that I learned from Maya, the Martial Arts Industry Association. Really excited to see some of you at MayaCon tomorrow and this weekend. For us, what our programs were is we had a basic program, an elite program, and a master's club program. And I was fortunate to train in a Taekwondo school growing up that had a similar setup where there was basic black belt club and master's club. So when I launched my jujitsu school, I launched with these three programs. So I would be able to plant the seed of the upgrade programs of the new students coming in. And not a lot of schools that are first getting started are thinking about having upgrades. What you have to understand is every successful business model has upgrades. Okay. When you go and purchase a flight, if you're flying down to Myocon, they ask, do you want more leg room, right? Do you want to go to first class? When you go to buy a car, do you want, cloth seats or do you want leather seats? When you go to McDonald's, they're going to ask, do you want fries with that? They're all upgrade programs. Okay. And when you have upgrade programs, this is going to be a key strategy that is going to allow you to increase your student value, which we're going to talk about in a second because you need to be tracking your numbers. So you need to make sure you have determined what are these key programs that you are going to offer. I am really not a fan of starting with more than 2 to 3. And that's a mistake that I think a lot, especially like MMA programs do. They want to have this class and this class and this class and this class and this class, as opposed to packaging it together inside of a program. Okay. And also understanding who your avatar is. So during this stability of 0 to 15, we want to establish and determine what our key programs are. Next up is pricing and sales mastery. And one of the big mistakes that I think a lot of school owners make is they look at themselves as, I'm a martial artist that owns a martial arts school, instead of looking at yourself as a business owner who sells martial arts services. Whether you like sales or not, sales cures all. I really don't know very many business owners that are upset and sad when the sales are rolling in. However, I know a lot of business owners that are very upset and sad when they aren't. It literally will cure all, but you need to have a process. And that's going to include having your bread and butter trial offer. And I'm not here to, go on a tangent about should you do a paid offer, should you do a free offer. You need to figure out what works for you, but you need to have some form of an offer so that somebody can test you out. Then you need to have some form of an actual process when they come in that allows you to convert them from trial to actual long-term paying member. We use the 4-step enrollment process taught by MIA, the Martial Arts Industry Association, and we had 4 different pricing options. We have a paid in full option, and then we have some down payment options, and the more you put down, the lower it will bring your monthly payment. There needs to be a system to this because eventually, when you are in those significant stages, I would bet if I asked the people that said they were in the significant stages, they're probably not the ones that are doing the sales every single day, maybe once in a while. But when I sold my school, I hadn't done an enrollment. I hadn't enrolled a student in years because it was something that was the responsibility of our program directors and our chief instructors. So you want to make sure that you do have that actual enrollment process and you're leveraging all 5 profit centers. This is a really big mistake that people make in this startup. They just want to focus on new students, which is important. But if you don't do what we said, number 2, which is your 3 key programs, a lot of people don't have upgrades. A lot of people just automatically put people on month to month, which can hurt your ability to get renewals. Many people just don't even offer retail and say, yeah, just go get it on your own. And then they're not doing special events. They're not doing private lessons and parent night outs and all of those things. And if that's the case, right, in many situations, these school owners are only leveraging 1 or 2 of these 5 profit centers. And if you want to go from that startup to that next phase, you need to be leveraging all of those 5 profit centers. Okay. Next up is your intake and mitigating processes. As somebody that has been sued in my martial arts school, you need to make sure you are protecting yourself at all costs. So that means having the proper forms, the waivers, the insurance, the agreements. And these shouldn't be things that you're writing yourself. I wouldn't even recommend to have ChatGPT do it. Get an actual lawyer to create these for you. But you need to have an intake and mitigating process lined up. And this also, when I say intake, that's where I include the introductory lesson and the system that is behind that introductory lesson. If you find that you have leads coming in and appointments showing up, but you're not closing them, there's either something wrong with what is happening on the mat, or there is something wrong with what is happening in that introductory lesson process. Okay. So you want to have that very systemized and lined up. Like, okay, well, when they come in, this is the first thing that they're going to do. Then we're going to have them get on the mat. Then we're going to introduce them to this person. And then after that, we're going to bring them into the office and we're going to do our 4-step enrollment process. I'm not here to tell you this is the absolute best and right way, but you need to have a way in terms of converting people that are first coming into your school into long-term members. And a big part of that is that intake process. How do you make them feel when they walk in? One of the simplest things that we ever did is we had a whiteboard on the front desk. And when people came in for their first lesson, their name was on the whiteboard. And that just kind of blew their mind that we would be that prepared and welcome them in a personalized welcome on the whiteboard. Okay. The other thing is you need to be training your staff to do this, right? I would think eventually you're going to want to take a vacation. And when you take a vacation, we don't just want the business to stay the same and stagnate and plateau. We want it to be able to grow. So everybody on your team should really, at a minimum, be able to know how to get people to sign waivers and fill out your basic intake forms. Okay. So this is a process that a lot of schools just kind of, they build the wings as the plane goes down. And this is what I would really put some thought into for those of you that are in this 0 to 15 range. Okay. Next up is your schedule. And I do believe there is a right way to do a schedule and a wrong way. And most people do their schedule based off of what their instructor did. And I know that's what I did. I was like, oh, well, my instructor runs classes at these times, so I'll run them. What we had found is that there are schedules that will ultimately be built out to help you with retention. We don't just want, especially our kids students, to come in and do the same thing every single day. It needs to change. It needs to switch up. And that's the other benefit of having those upgrade programs. We're a fan of using the ABC schedule. So A days are on Monday and Tuesday, B days are on Wednesday and Thursday, and C days are on Friday and Saturday. The A days are curriculum days. I know if I asked a bunch of adults and a bunch of kids, would you rather me teach you just curriculum that you have to do for testing, or do you want to drill? Do you want to roll? Do you want to spar? They're all going to say, we want to drill, we want to roll, we want to spar, right? And oftentimes schools just stuff so much curriculum down their students' throats. And when you have this ABC day set up where A is the curriculum day, B is the theme day, C is the specialty day, it makes every single class slightly different, okay? The other thing is your schedule needs to maximize profitability. And, I tell some people, yeah, we've had classes start as early as 3:30 or 4 o'clock. Like, for some schools, they're not starting until 6 p.m. And look, I get it. That's 6 p.m. That is the golden time slot, right? If you look at all your classes, I guarantee around your 6 o'clock class, those are your jam-packed classes. But you should be offering classes in an X schedule where you have classes before 6 p.m. and classes after 6 p.m. because different families have different setups. Some parents want to get all the extracurriculars done before dinner. Some parents want to get them done after dinner, okay? And you also want to have a schedule that maximizes your space. I just see a lot of schools in this phase, they don't really think about how can I build a schedule that doesn't just maximize profitability in my space, but also helps with retention, okay? Next up, tracking your numbers. If you guys have been following me for a while, I say math is the path. And this is probably, if I had to go back and look, this is probably the one thing that I wish I would have focused more on in the beginning, because the reality is you need data to make data-driven decisions instead of egotistical decisions or emotional decisions. And I was not great at tracking the data in the beginning, right? Like the only number I was tracking, which was like, how much money is in my bank account? Am I going to be able to afford my expenses this month? Okay. And that's a lagging indicator. It's not a leading indicator. So from the beginning, there's lots of numbers you can track. These are the ones that when you're in this phase, this stage, that you absolutely should be looking at: the number of leads you have, the number of appointments, the number of shows, the number of closes, what's your profitability, right? Your revenue and your profits, what your student value is. That attrition should be on the next one, and what your attrition is, okay? And these two, student value and attrition, they just don't get talked about early on, and they're really important. And your student value is just how much money each student is worth. So you just take your revenue and you divide it by your active count, and that's going to give you your student value. And a few years ago, we would really want our clients to be at about $180 student value. Now we're really pushing towards like 200 and 220. And when you have a high student value, this is how you'll see schools that have 150 students making more money than a school that has 200 or 250 students, because the school with the higher student count actually has a lower student value, okay? You don't need anything fancy. A simple Google spreadsheet to track this is enough. When you eventually have staff, having them send what we call an EOD, so an end of day. It could be an email, it could be a Slack message that has these numbers in there. It's a very basic and simplistic way for you to have a pulse on your business. Besides student value, you also need to know your attrition. So your attrition and your churn, those two terms are used interchangeably. And the average martial arts school churns 5%. So if you have 100 students, you're losing 5 students a month, which means you've got to bring on 5 students just to stay where you're currently at. A really good martial arts school should be aiming for about 3%, okay? And in some cases, I mean, I've seen schools 10, 15, 20% attrition, and it's why you feel like you need to be signing up 20 or 30 new students every single month, okay? If you need 30 new students every single month, it's probably because all of the ones that are coming in, they're leaving out the back door, and you have an attrition problem, okay? So we really want to be that 5% or below, but 3% is ideal, okay? Next up, and then we're going to pause for questions. This first stage has the most, because again, this is where we're setting that foundation, okay? Referral marketing. Okay, there's a difference between saying you have a referral program and your people knowing what that referral program is. Those are two completely different things. And the question would be, if I went out to some of the parents inside of your, in your lobby and asked them, hey, do you know what Gracie Pack's referral program is? Are they going to say yes, or are they going to say no? All right. I believe that our best students, our best clients often come from referrals, because they're the people closest to our current clients. And, we really need to make sure that our referral program is visual. So at a minimum, what I challenge you to do is have some form of a poster up inside of your school that highlights what your referral program is. We like to use a prize wheel that you get off Amazon for $40. And if somebody refers and that person signs up, not on a trial, but on a full program, they get to spin the wheel at the end of the class during mat chat, so everybody else gets to see it. Why do you want to do that publicly? Because you shouldn't stop marketing just because they become students. We always need to be marketing to our students, okay? And if I gave you a choice to have 10 referrals or 10 Facebook leads, you're going to take those 10 referrals every day of the week and twice on Sunday. But you have to make sure that it's visual, okay? You constantly need to be reminding your students, okay? Next up is, at this stage, 0 to 15, one of the big mistakes that I see is that school owners go out and start looking for instructors before they start looking for front desk, admin, program director, manager, whatever you want to call it, somebody that can help you at the front desk. And it's interesting to me, because I would think that if you opened a martial arts school, you're probably love martial arts and teaching, and it's probably your zone of genius. It's the thing that you do better, right, than all of the other things. Like, are you a better instructor, or are you better at following up with the leads? And which one would you rather do? And I highly implore you, if you're at this stage and you're looking to start getting some help, that you look to really start here and not start with trying to get yourself off the mat, because that is your zone of genius. And this person is just there to really help oversee that customer journey, right? When somebody comes in as a prospect, turning them into a student, eventually turning them into an advocate, and they ensure that the services that we offer are delivered smoothly, payments are processes, clients and prospects are booked. They're there to help you identify problems and fix them, okay? And this doesn't have to start as a full-time gig. I told you earlier, I hired somebody. She was part-time Monday through Thursday, I think from like 4 to 8 was when I had her come in. And it was just such a huge help because I was on the mat teaching and I needed somebody there, not just to greet the prospects, but also help with customer service. Okay. So this is really the first role, not trying to outsource your zone of genius with an instructor. Next up, and this is probably going to be a little controversial, but the sooner you start your systems manual, your playbooks, your SOPs, your processes, and getting them out of your head and onto paper, the more confident that you're going to feel in hiring other people. I think one of the big challenges that we have is when we know we need help, help looks like a lot of extra work because we have to teach them, we have to train them, we have to onboard them, we have to evaluate them. But like I said early, great businesses are built by having great teams. And every single one of these phases, that team is going to need to expand. And I don't just necessarily mean expand with the number of help, but every phase, your team has to get better and better in terms of their skill set and what they can deliver. So the sooner that you can start writing these processes out, you're just going to feel more confident in hiring people and bringing them on to help. Okay. Whether that means you're staying on the mat full time and you're just wanting to hire somebody to help at the front desk, or maybe eventually you want to hire an assistant instructor so they can start helping with running warm-ups and games so you can have conversations with parents. But you need to start building this out as soon as possible because you have a system already, regardless if it's written out, you're doing something in a specific way. It might not always be the best way, but it is your way. And just one of the biggest mistakes I see business owners make is they keep it all up in their head. All right. And just because it's in your head, like to me, that's not a system. It's not a process until it's written down on paper. Okay. The last part of the startup phase are community events. And I have seen time and time again, this be the absolute fastest way for a school to go from 0 to 100 students. And this is coming from somebody that owns a digital marketing agency and highly believes in Facebook ads and Google ads. There's just nothing that is going to allow you to sign up a large group of people all at once in a short period of time, more so than you hosting community events, aka mass enrollments. And this is where you invite a large amount of people into your school for a free themed class, right? It's got to be themed, so it's not just like more of the same of martial arts. And then you pitch the entire group at the end of it. So meaning you have some form of conversion process. And usually because it is a mass enrollment, there is a slight discount on the down payment that is required. And our most successful mass enrollment that we ever had, I think it was either 31 or 32 new students enrolled. And this was during an anniversary party that was 4 hours. So we kind of dubbed our anniversary party a community event. One of the strongest relationships that you can eventually create are partners in education relationships. So relationships with the schools so that you can use the school to help funnel students, predominantly kids, but you can absolutely go after, teachers and staff and admin and stuff like that, but into your school so you can do mass enrollments. And besides tracking my numbers, I wish I would have learned this process a lot sooner because let's just even think right now it's summer, right? Back to school is right around the corner. Open houses are going to be able to, occur. You'll be able to set up booths there. If you signed up 20 to 30 students in August and September, I mean, that completely can change the entire year around for you. Okay. So one thing I do want to touch on is kind of solving the icon problem, okay? As the figurehead of your business, your members expect to see you in every position and view your staff only as substitutes of lesser value. And this is what some of you think. And this might be the position that you're in. And it is flattering at first to feel that important. You feel loved, you feel irreplaceable, but it will ultimately burn you out. And if clients are disappointed when you aren't around, that means you're an icon, and that's a problem. And that means you own a job and you don't own a business. And this was a quote from Chris Cooper, the guy that wrote that book, Founder, Farmer, Tinker, Thief. Okay. And we have to make sure that we don't stay in this icon problem because it is flattering. It does feed into your ego. Okay. These are things that I hear often when people are in this phase. No one can do it like me. There's no money to pay anybody, to pay me. Leaders eat last, so I should do all of it. I got to pay off all my debt before I could take a paycheck. And this last one, especially if you have significant others, everyone will forgive my exhaustion, hot temper, and poverty because they will respect my hard work. Like, these are literally things that new business owners think of, and we've got to get out of that mindset, okay? What I want you to remember is that the real path of success does not go straight up like this. It actually, you go forward a little bit and then you take a couple of steps back, and then you go forward a little bit and then you take a couple of steps back. And that just happens over and over and over again, right? Success is not just this, line that goes straight up. It's these up and down lines, these very small up and down lines that eventually will have that trajectory, but you're going to make progress and then you're going to backtrack. And the key is just to make these loops smaller and smaller because you're gaining more wisdom every single time. All right. The last thing on this, don't be a beaver. Okay. If this stage had a mascot in the startup, it's the beaver. And it's the stereotypical picture of hard work, but it's the only asset. And it might be admirable, but at the end of the day, what you got to remember, beavers are rodents. Okay. And I really wanted to believe that, man, I'm the hardest worker. If I just work hard, I will win. Like, work hard, yes, but also work smart, which is why you want to have these 10 foundational systems in place. Okay. So out of these 10, look at this list real quick. Let me know in the chat. Thanks, Jonas. We'll send the recording later. Let me know in the chat, what is the one that you feel like, even if you're in the significant stage, what is the one that you feel like we might need to strengthen this kind of foundational strategy? Let me know. Master Bolts, number 8, hire a program director. Yes, sir. You can afford it. Do it. Need a program director. Let me know, guys. It's so much more fun when you're participating. You just don't just look at me. All right. Tracking numbers in the systems manual. Thank you, Ms. Zimmerman. Documenting systems. Yes, Mr. Steve, especially because you are an offsite owner. That is incredibly important. Hire program director, community events, referral marketing. We've got key programs and pricing. Yes, super important. 7 and 9. Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay. So the bulk of this was going to be spent on the startup because this is really the foundation. So the next pieces are going to move a little bit quickly, but the next stage is stability. And this is the 15 to 30. This is really where you create a cycle of predictable harvest and where your systems and policies really shine. And this is where your staff can start replacing you in the lower value roles. Okay. If we had hashtags for this, it would be systems and policy. Again, you're going to see hiring staff. We want to go from me to we, and we don't just want to be the icon. We want the team to be the brand. And I know that might, take a hit to the ego, but if you ever want to go on vacation and come back and your school actually grow and not just stay where it's at or regress, this is the key. Okay. And I think there's 7 checklist items. And it's not just about making sure, it's not just about doing work, guys. It's making sure that we are doing the right work, okay? So as you're starting to scale and you're making more money, you now have more profits to reinvest back into the business. And this is really where starting to think about, what does a team look like? What does going from at first I'm an assistant instructor, maybe eventually I'll be a head instructor, or, maybe I'm a front desk, part-time admin, and I want to be a full-time program director. What does that look like? And This was something that I did closer to the significant stage, and it caused me a lot of interruptions in my day to day because everybody was reporting to me. And one of the best things that I ever did was creating an organizational chart so that assistant instructors knew, okay, I am reporting to the head instructor. Head instructors knew, okay, this is the person that they are reporting to, so that I didn't become the bottleneck with decision making. So you really want to start to think about what does the organizational structure inside of my team look like? Because now I'm going to start hiring a team. Okay. The other thing is, as you start hiring a team, we always want to make sure that we are mitigating our risk, right? And one of the things that you need to do as you start to bring on team members is have an employee handbook. Chris, that sounds very corporate. Well, maybe it is, but I want you to be able to protect yourself. And if you're going to build a team, you need to do it right. And you want to make sure that this is done by a professional. And there are companies that you can hire out, pay them hourly for a few $100. You could get this done. If I were probably to do this all over again, I'd probably create the base outline utilizing ChatGPT and then take it to an HR compliance, consultant and ask them like, hey, is this compliant? So that the bulk of the work would be done. If you are hiring people, hopefully you are paying them as you should be. And you're using some form of payroll processing company like Gusto or Paychex or ADP, they have services that will help you do this as well. Okay. But you need to start thinking about protecting yourself, because now you're not just making $5,000 a month. At this stage, you're making up to $30,000 a month. And, the further up you go, the bigger the fall if something happens. So we always want to make sure that we are protecting ourselves. Okay. Next up would be hiring a replacement in a primary role. So this is where I would start thinking of hiring out like that instructor role, so that I am not always having to be on the mat, and that I'm on the mat because I want to be on the mat. And what that really looked like for me, I got to a point where, man, I really don't want to teach those 3 and 4-year-old classes anymore. And I would prefer not to teach the white belt classes. I really enjoy teaching the advanced classes. I really enjoy teaching the elite program classes or the master's club classes. And this is where you're starting again to increase that income, and you can reinvest those profits back into building out your team. All right. So this was where I started looking at hiring instructors. And what I want you to remember is that your employees make a living under your umbrella. Okay. And that is going to be limited if your umbrella never rises. I think if you asked an employee, would you rather work for a company that was stagnant or a company that was growing? I think the answer is always going to be a company that is growing. And I believe it's your duty to your team, not just yourself, to remove yourself from their work and give them the resources and, provide them what they need to in order to succeed, so that that umbrella goes higher and higher. And I always tell my team, like, my goal is to make sure everybody's dream in this company can fit inside, right? It's not just my dreams, it's their dreams as well. And that's how you scale a business. Okay. Now that you start having team members, you should probably start holding meetings and trainings, right? They're not just going to magically do what you want them to do. You got to train them to do it. And one of the things that we did earlier on, like at this level, was having standard Monday meetings with our program director and with the instructors. And then also having like daily check-in meetings between the program director and the instructor, and then training the team. I'm a big fan of theming days in a company. So like Monday is meeting day, Wednesday could be training day, Friday could be something else. But for us, Mondays was always meetings, Wednesdays was always training. And if you let me know in the chat, how many team members do you have? It could be part-time, it could be full-time. Just let me know how many people do you have helping you out? Let me know. All right, we got 1, 5, 3, 4, 8, 1, 7. Okay. So for almost all of you, you have a handful of people there, right? And let me know, yes or no, has anybody on your team ever done anything that frustrated you or upset you? Yes or no? Have they ever done anything? Right? Always. Yes, yes, yes. Well, here's the thing. This is what I want you to do. Whatever it is, write it down. What they did to piss you off, write it down. Never, LOL. And then I want you to ask yourself, did I train them on this? And then I want you to ask yourself, did I train them on this more than once? For some reason, we have this like thought that, oh, I just got to teach it to them one time and then they get it. It's like my 5-year-old son, Cruz, right? He's learning how to read. You think it just takes one time? Of course not. People often need to be reminded more than they need to be taught. So as your team starts to expand, which all of you have a team that's starting to expand. Everybody but one person had at least one, and some of you had 3, 4, 5, 7, 8. You need to be hosting regular staff meetings and staff trainings, okay? This is also where your school is starting to get bigger in attendance and student count. You know, you might be at the 100+ student count now, depending on where your student value is, and it can be a lot harder to keep track of everybody, right? Kind of easy when you only have 30, 40, 50 students to know everybody's name and to be able to have individual conversations with all of them. When you start hitting those triple digit numbers, it makes it a little bit more difficult. And this is where being very mindful of what are the retention strategies that you have in place. What are the things that we are going to do to retain the students is so important, okay? And, that could, be from your upgrade programs. Do you have a competition team? Are you doing parent night outs? Do you, offer these there's so many different things that go behind retention, but you need to be conscious of it. And for anybody that is starting out, I always tell them every single month, what I want on your calendar is one recruiting strategy, one retention strategy, and one revenue strategy. That's what I want. So one recruiting strategy could be, all right, we are, and not just a recurring. Like if you're always doing Facebook ads, then that shouldn't be it, right? The recruiting strategy might be we're going to host a mass enrollment, right? Then a retention strategy. The retention strategy might be, okay, we're going to do a member appreciation day, or we're going to do a parent night out. And then the revenue strategy could be, we're going to bundle some things in our pro shop and try to clear it out. Or we're going to do a push, buy 2 private lessons, get 1 private lesson free. Okay. So we want to have a recruiting strategy, a retention strategy, and a revenue strategy every single month. And this just gets so much more important as you start going up the phases. Okay. And I said this earlier, but just remember, marketing and sales don't stop once someone becomes a student. Yes, Mr. Sky, I can send you the customer journey. Okay. We always need to be marketing to our team. At this point, with the leftover profits, reinvesting them, highly recommend joining a coaching group. I don't think there's anybody better than Maya, the Martial Arts Industry Association. They offer a free martial arts academy audit. So they'll talk to you about where you're at, where you want to go, and they'll kind of audit your systems. And it's just a phenomenal group to be a part of. But you need to get yourself around other successful martial arts schools, especially at this age. At this stage. And then finally, you got to be leveraging all levels of marketing, organic social media, your search engine optimization, and your Google business profile, paid advertising, email, direct mail, phone calls, face-to-face. I wrote a book about it. It's called The Best Known Dojo. We do have a free download on the Grow Pro Agency website at the top, which is the Internet Marketing Guide, which kind of breaks it down, but the book goes really in depth. And at this point, you do need to consider what can you outsource, right? You might be able to handle the organic social media and the email and the print marketing and the phone calls and the face-to-face, but maybe you have no idea how to run Facebook ads and Google ads, and that's something you should outsource, okay? So at this phase, we want to make sure we're extending all of these different marketing strategies. We have more lines out in the ocean, right? So when we end up doing the right work, we start creating a reliable income for ourselves as well as for the team. And we start creating long-term systems for long-term cash. And at this stage, it's really cool because we're changing a ton of lives. Okay. So out of the stability, out of these 7, which one do you think you need to focus on the most? Leadership ladder, employee handbook, hiring an instructor, staff meetings, trainings, evaluations? Do we need to focus on our retention strategy? Let me know in the chat, guys. Maybe you need to join a coaching program. Maybe you got to level up your marketing. Which one? All right, coaching, retention and marketing, staff training, staff and coaching. I love it, guys. Very good. Staff meetings and trainings. Awesome. Retention, cool. Thank you for sharing. All right, let's bring this home. Scale. Now we're getting bigger. This is really where leadership comes into place. And if we had to hashtag it, this is leaders and focus and resilience. And this is really where we're going from operator to owner. Okay. This is a picture of when COVID hit. We all remember those days if you had a school and you had to teach Zoom classes. Okay. I, right here, am the only one not in a uniform. I was not teaching Zoom classes. I was actually an owner. I was not operating because I had built a team out that could do that for me, which allowed me to focus on training them. It allowed me to focus on giving them the resources and strategizing how are we going to get through COVID. And what you just have to remember is what got you to one phase isn't going to get you to the next. And this is where we build the entrepreneur and develop new skills and new strengths, okay? Man, has this just shown up time and time again in my life. Your success will be defined by the work you do on yourself. I tell my team this all the time. You have got to work harder on yourself than you do your job, okay? So in this particular stage, you're going to start continuing to hire out support roles and bench strength. So that might look like additional instructors. That might look like maybe, you have 400, 500 students and you need more help at the front desk. If you have 400, 500 students, but you're not in the significance yet, though, that's a problem because that means student value is off, okay? This is also where you should have enough to reinvest in hiring a mentor. And I think one-on-one mentorship is the absolute best way because it allows them to fast track your success as opposed to just a group coaching program. Group coaching programs are great. One-on-one, if it's the right mentor, to me, that is phenomenal, okay? This is also where you can start looking at adding additional programs, birthday parties, after school, summer camps. I told you this was a big mistake that I made. I jumped into after school birthday parties and summer camps way too early because I hadn't maximized the profitability in the evening program. And that's typically why somebody wants to do after school and summer camp, because you're just not making enough in your evening program. I wish I just would have gone all in on the evening program, got that systemized, got that team on lock, and then started looking at these additional programs. So I do think mastery of those three primary programs, your basic, elite, masters, ultimate, whatever you want to call it, that is most important, okay? This is also where you need to really hone in on your avatar. There's a difference between having good clients, bad clients, and no clients, and I'd rather have no client than a bad client because a bad student, man, that can affect everybody else and it can affect the culture of your school. And at this point, it's not like you really need to sign up every single student. You're making a good living here. So you can turn away the people that aren't your ideal customer. All right. And this, again, is, this is where the leadership comes in. This is where you're really mentoring your staff. And you need to be modeling the behavior that you want from your staff. You need to be setting the mission, teaching them the vision, mapping the journey, and talking to them. And I really look at myself as a coach to my team. I am there to coach them be the best that they can, not just professionally, but also personally. And at this scale, what you have to remember is you've got to devote as much time talking to your team as you do to your students. Some of you need to write that down. You need to be spending more time talking and training to your team as you do to your students. That, amount of care and quality that you put into student-facing media, you've got to do that for your team as well, okay? And at this stage, students' relationships need to be with your brand, not with a specific staff member. So in the beginning, we have the icon problem. What we don't want to have is have another icon problem, and that icon is not you, it's somebody else on your team, okay? So the relationship really needs to be with the brand. At this point, you can also start considering productizing some of your services with courses and seminars and DVDs. I have a lot of clients that have done a lot of success with this, and this would be a good time to start considering that. Are there other things you could be offering your students as revenue generators, okay? And then I really do think at this point, you should be living a pretty ideal day. And for some of you, that ideal day might be being in the school for 12 hours. For some of you, it might be, okay, I'm only in the school 3 days. For some of you, it might be, I'm only in the school for 1 day. And I'm not here to tell you what that should be. Everybody's definition of success is different, okay? But when you're doing 30 to 50,000, you should have enough money reinvested back in the business to hire the staff so that you are not chained to the school every single day unless you want to be. And I know there are some of you that are like, Chris, if I could die in my martial arts school, I would be okay with that. And that's completely okay, but that's not everybody. All right. So 1 through 8, what is the one that you think you would need to focus on more for those of you that are in that scale and significant stage? Do we need to hire out some more bench strength? Do we need to hire a mentor? Is it time to look at additional programs? Mentor your staff? Yes, Mrs. Sky, love that. Awesome. Keep them coming, guys. I know we're 2 minutes over. If you need to leave, completely understand. We'll get you the checklist. We'll send that out in the recording. But we do have one more phase to go through, and that is significance. So this is the 50,000 and above. You know, it's pretty cool at this scale. You're at that $500,000 school. And to me, that's, you know, that's a really solid school. That's $42,500 a month average. And this significance, now you're on your way to that $1 million school. All right. And this is all about connection. It's about growth. It's about giving back. It's about leveling up yourself physically, mentally, spiritually, and leveling up your team to provide career opportunities. At this phase, you really got to ask yourself, am I just offering them a job or am I offering them a career? Right? When I sold my school, my team, they had unlimited PTO. They had a 401k with a 3% match. They had health insurance if they wanted to have health insurance. That is a career. That's not just a job. Okay. And really at this phase, because you have trained your team up, you should be living that absolute perfect day. There's a really great book called The Perfect Day Formula by Craig Ballantyne. It's a quick read. It's a simple read, but it's about setting up your day. Like, what exactly do you want your mornings to look like? What exactly do you want your afternoons to look like? What about your evenings? Okay. And really capitalizing on being able to get in a flow state, because as an entrepreneur, when you can get in a flow state, you can create a lot of really great things. Okay. Be honest with you, I let myself go as I was building my business. All of my time and my energy went into my work, and my health, suffered for it. It just went to the back burner. And I know that, this story is very common with business owners, because it's hard. Guys, it is hard, right? Be the first to tell you it's hard. And everybody that, kind of preaches, make sure I shouldn't say everybody. For the most part, entrepreneurs that have hit a certain level of success, the kind of journey that they went through, usually health got put on the back burner. And now for me, with where I'm at, I've got to show up for 43 employees every single day. And if I don't do some form of exercise in the morning, I am literally not capable of mentally being the leader that they need. And at this phase, because you do have people that can help with all of those hard things in the business, you've got to be prioritizing your health. And I mean, we could argue this should have been at stage 1 and phase 1, right? But I just know what it's like being an entrepreneur, because I've been through it. And when you're, struggling to put food on the table and, getting all your bills paid, like, it's kind of the last thing, and it goes to the back burner. But at this phase, we absolutely should be prioritizing that. And we need to start thinking about our significant strategy. What is our long-term goal? Do we just want to keep one location? Do we want to open up a second location? Do we want to just continue to make small, regular upgrades? Do you eventually want to sell because there's something else that you want to do in the next chapter of your life? And for some of you, it might be, yeah, Chris, I'm cool with dying on the mat. And I completely respect that, if that's what your definition of success is, right? But we've got to start thinking long-term, because what's going to happen as you start to scale and you grow a team, people quit when they run out of runway. And if there's nowhere else for them to go, this was one of the main reasons why I decided to sell my school, because I didn't have dreams of opening up multiple locations. And I had an instructor who was with me for a few years, and he had turned 50. And I think he was kind of going through a little bit of a midlife crisis. And he came to me and he was like, I'm 50 years old. Am I just going to be, teaching classes until I'm 70? I didn't have an answer for him. I didn't have an answer because I wasn't trying to scale. And when you start opening up multiple locations, maybe he could be a general manager and oversee some of those locations. He ran out of runway, and a couple of years later, he ended up quitting. And that was a big motivator for me to sell because I knew that wasn't what I was going to do. And I would always kind of have to deal with staff churn. And if you're okay with dealing with staff churn and hiring new people to come in, then okay. I was at a stage in my life where I just didn't want to do that anymore. And I also had something else that was really inspiring and motivating to me while building GrowPro. But you need to start thinking long term. And you also need to start thinking about, retirement and benefits. Like at this phase, I do believe you should be having a healthcare allowance for your team. You should be offering some form of IRA or 401k and a match for them. We don't want them to just come every day and think they have a job. We want them to have that long-term career. And you're also more than likely paying yourself more. So are there maybe some passive income, and I put passive in quotes because nothing is really passive, right? I mean, everything, takes work, but, do we want to start investing in stocks? Do we want to start maybe creating some informational products as additional streams of revenue? Do we want to do affiliate marketing, potentially real estate investments? So for me, I leaned in heavy on real estate investments, and I realized I don't really enjoy that. I had a couple of mentors. I still have a couple of mentors that are really big into it. I'm very blessed that, I was able to, purchase a couple of commercial buildings, but I don't enjoy it. What I enjoy is building businesses. So for me, acquiring other businesses is the way that I want to, continue to grow income. And that's different for everybody. But at this phase, we do need to start looking at that. All right. So you've got your perfect day. You've got your exercising mind and body, building your significant strategy, starting to think of retirement, and then your passive income. So I created this checklist. Let me just pull it up here, and I'm going to drop it in the chat for you guys. But it's just a basic Google Doc, guys. And it has each one of these phases in there. And my recommendation is just to go through and rate yourself on a scale of like 1 to 5. 5, I'm a black belt. 1, I'm a white belt in each one of these. And then you kind of have a roadmap of like, okay, I know that I'm not doing a great job. I'm like a 2 in tracking my numbers. I'm, 4s and 5s and everything else, but I'm a 2 in tracking my numbers. And that will give you the roadmap of where you need to start. Kyle says he's a white belt. Kyle, we all have to start somewhere. So that is 100% okay. All right. Any questions, guys? And I dropped the link in there, so you should have it. We'll also email that out. But any questions on any of the phases, anything that we went over today? Appreciate you guys sticking with me as we went over a little bit. It's just a lot of content today. All right. You are very welcome. Sky family, will I see you this weekend? Yes? Awesome. All right. I'll see you guys tomorrow. For those of you going to MayaCon, can't wait to see everybody. As always, if you need anything, feel free to reach out. Appreciate everybody. We do these every single month. It's my way of giving back. It's completely free. Just here to provide value to you guys, and excited to see many of you this weekend. Have a great weekend.